So Vim, you first got involved in World War II, or in...
I had a professor who was Jewish, and he wanted me to succeed him and he would retire. So we got to know each other quite well. When the war broke out, he called me into the office and says, Wim, are you willing to help Jews to keep them out of the hands of the Gestapo? So I thought about it and I said, yes, I will do that. And then I was taught how to falsify passports, IDs, and so on and so forth. Technically, I was very good in my work. Therefore, I was taken over by a large Dutch underground movement called the Free Netherlands. And I worked from 41, 42 till the beginning of September 42 when I was arrested by the Gestapo.
That sounds really nice. Like right about now when I'm in the middle of this.
Called the Free Netherlands?
The Free Netherlands, yes.
And you said you were... This was 41...
This was, I was arrested September 42. I started my underground work, I would say March 41 or something like that. I'm not very far off. An interesting thing is that the night before I got arrested, I had the feeling I would get arrested. And all the material that I had in my house, bundled it up and took it to a fellow underground worker, said, I don't feel safe, you keep it. So when the Gestapo came, they turned my apartment upside down, but they couldn't find anything. Didn't help, they took me anyway.
And you said, you'd mentioned something about getting betrayed?
I was betrayed. At the Royal Yacht Club I met a very attractive lady, and I took her for dinner and lunch. I never told her anything. I think that because of my schedule, she must have suspected me. When the war was over and I got back to Rotterdam, I found out that she had betrayed many, many, many people.
Oh.
We think that she was not really pro-German. We think she did it to go to bed with German officers. She committed suicide on May 5, 1945. She knew what was going to happen to her.
And so the Nazis found you through her, or?
They put me in solitary confinement, and then I got a hearing. Now, when you falsify signatures, you write them from the right to the left. Then you get a better signature, better falsification than you write it from the left to the right. Don't ask me why. I was taught that way. Therefore, I could write mirror writing. I still write mirror writing and can write upside down. It makes no difference. I was sitting at a certain distance from the people, the German officers who gave me the hearing, but I could see on the table a piece of paper. There was a table with names on it. I could read those names. Certain names were crossed out. I thought those people were the people who had been killed. So during my hearing I said, well, I was in touch with that person, taking the killed people. Therefore my hearing was fairly easy. I got out of it.
What year were you put in a concentration camp?
On Christmas, the day before Christmas, 1942.
And it was here in Dachau?
That was in Holland. There was a camp in Holland where we went to. I stayed there for about half a year. Then we were brought over to another camp in Holland. And then in 44 I was brought to the concentration camp of Dachau.
Ah. Okay.
So if I could even go, till 62, just 5 more years, or if it really gets bad, 50. We're really clunk.
And was anyone you were close with or knew? Were they also captured?
Two friends of mine with whom I had an apartment together, students of course, were also arrested, but they got out. After I think 1 month or 3 months they were released.
And you said you were in a camp for about 3 years.
It was 3 years, nearly 3 years in the camps, yes. Yeah.
What was an average day like in the camp?
In Dachau you got up at 5:30. Then first you had to make your bed, and that had to be very precise, because if there would be an inspection by a German officer and the bed was not made exactly right, the head of the barrack and prisoner may get punished by the Germans. So we had to build the bed very carefully. Then you had to shave, but we didn't get things to shave us with. I shaved with a blade. I kept the blade in my hand and tried to shave as well as I could. Then we had breakfast. In the morning you got a cup of hot brown water. One day it was called coffee, the other day it was called tea. Then we had to walk to the barrack square to be counted. Counting was very important. The difficulty of the walking was this. There was an orchestra playing music, beautiful music. Prisoners who could play those instruments, the instruments stolen from a Jewish orchestra. And the contrast between the beautiful music and our lousy condition made it even worse. The contrast was so strong. On the barrack square we were arranged by blocks. There were 32 barracks in Dachau. You stood with your barrack. Counting was important for various reasons. A, did the number of prisoners that was counted agree with the administration? If not, you had to stand there for hours and hours till they had solved the problem. Maybe somebody had escaped, maybe a mistake was being made. And you learned to stand shoulder to shoulder. You learned to sleep when you were standing up.
Wow.
Then it was important because the amount of food that we got was determined by the amount of people in the barrack. So occasionally we would take with us somebody who had died during the night, carrying him on our shoulders, dragging him to the barrack square. Then our barrack would get a little bit more food. Then you had to work. That was a very important thing, the work. You could get a good job, you could get a lousy job. A lousy job would be hard physical labor. My first job was to break in the military shoes for the soldiers. They had to be softened up. That ruined your feet, but that is something else. We had to do that. Another possibility was that you would work outside of the camp in Munich. Dachau is located 10 miles northwest of Munich, to pick up the debris made by the Allied bombing. And you had to learn how to do that. You would go with a group of prisoners to Munich. Then soldiers would surround you with the guns, and then you had to clean it up. Now suppose that one soldier didn't feel well, maybe he had had a fight with his wife or whatever. He would go up to you, grab your hat and throw it outside of the circle of the German officers and said, "Fetch your cap." If you didn't obey him, he would shoot you. If you would try to fetch the cap, the soldiers surrounding you would shoot you. You have to learn to make yourself invisible,
Hmm.
and that is difficult. Continuously you have to work with your ears and your eyes what is happening around me. Uh, the good work was of course in those places where there was extra food, the kitchen, the hospital, and if you could get such a job it was great. The people in the kitchen had plenty to eat, and they would give food away for favors. One thing that is ill understood by people is this: the Germans treated the prisoners badly, but the prisoners treated each other very badly.
Oh.
Because you are so hungry.
Mm.
They would betray you to the Germans for a piece of bread. You were hungry.
Mm.
A favorite way was this: you would go up to a prisoner, maybe you knew him or whatever, and say, "You don't look very well. Why don't you go to the hospital?" Well, you never felt well. And maybe the guy would say, "Well, indeed, why don't I go?" You had a range at the front of yours in the hospital that he would be admitted to the hospital. He would be put into a bed in the morning. At 9 o'clock in the morning, the German doctor would make his rounds. When he had made his rounds, somebody would go to that fellow you had persuaded to go to the hospital with a syringe, put 5 cc gasoline in your veins, you would be dead. Then he would steal the gold of the teeth out of your mouth and sell it to the Germans for bread.
Did you ever? How hungry did you feel? I mean, I'm sure everyone felt like they were
I
starving.
was lucky. In '39 I learned meditation, yoga exercises, mental exercises to try to think of nothing. I could do that for about 20 minutes, and somehow that helped me tremendously in the fact that I suffered considerably less from cold and hunger than other people.
Hmm.
But my weight went down to 88 pounds.
Whoa.
I could crawl, I could not walk. That was in the summer of 1944. But then I got out of that, and then I got a very good job in September 1944, and then I had a good life in concentration camps. I got dysentery, and you go to the hospital, but there is no medicine. A German, a communist, he had been there since 1934, the beginning of the camp of Dachau, saw me, a very bright guy, we were really good friends. He saw me, he said, "What are you doing here?" So I told him. He said, "Okay, I have medicine." He said, "Wait a minute." He went back to his barrack. Half an hour later he got back. He had the roasted coffee beans. He said, "Now, chew them very slowly, it will cure you." It did. Where did he get the coffee beans from? In a concentration camp. 44. 5 years blockade of Germany. 7 years of blockade of Germany. You don't ask, but he had coffee beans. That saved my life.
Wow. Did you ever have any confrontations with Nazi or German officers?
Not in the concentration camps, no.
Okay.
No. I had a certain confrontation in after the hospital. I got a good job, but then that happened to me what everybody who has a good job is afraid of. I got thrown out. I was unemployed, and when you're unemployed, the commander of Dachau will send you on transport to another camp where there is work for you. When you go to a new camp in the fall with the winter coming, you have no connections, you have no chance to stay alive. So I tried to make myself invisible. And I had a friend in the hospital, and he said, you come over my room and you stay there during the day. So after having been counted, I would walk with papers and books under my arm with a determined step to the hospital, went to that room and closed the door, and I was safe for the day. At a certain day, however, the head of my barrack discovered it, and he didn't like me. I don't know why. And he put me on the transport. However, I had worked on in a group of people. It was the employment office of the concentration camp, and the grandson of the last Minister of Foreign Affairs in Czechoslovakia before the war, Feierabend, and I were friends. He saw my name, crossed it out. I was safe. The head of the barrack had learned his lesson, and he picked me up in the middle of the night and put me in the barrack for the people who would go to a different camp. Had no chance. Now, there's a funny rule in the concentration camps. You never ask why. When you have had tuberculosis, you cannot go to another camp. I had tuberculosis and I got cured. Don't ask me how I got cured, I have no idea. But I still test my blood on the TB. Therefore I cannot give blood. So I went into the row of the Dutch doctor who was sitting there with many other doctors to say, have you had tuberculosis? He knew me, he said, oh yeah, he said, you have had the tuberculosis, you can go. I just wanted to step into the group of prisoners looking who is going, who is not going. I feel a hand on my shoulder, German officer. Where are you going? I told him, the doctor. You have this written black and white? No. Then he pushed me back. There I was standing. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. They were going at 1 o'clock. At 12:30, an Italian prisoner sees me. He was a rich industrialist from Torino. He said, what are you doing here? He said, oh, with God. Okay, he says, let me see what I can do. He must have bribed very many German officers because he had a fantastic life in the camp. Good clothes, good food. To make a long story short, 10 minutes before 1 o'clock my name was called, I could go. Later on, I learned what might have happened. That Italian must have gone to an officer and said, give me the Dutchman. And the officer must have said something like this, listen, we have often done business, this time I cannot do it. I need 1,500 people. I have 1,498. I'm 3 short. I cannot give them to you. The Italian must have said something like this, okay, I give you 3 people, you give me the Dutchman. He must have gone to the Russian barrack, where the Russians treated badly, worse than others were living. He must have convinced 3 people, 3 Russians, to go on the transport. Maybe saying it isn't so bad, I know it is not bad, give them money, cigarettes, I have no idea what. They went. I got out. These 3 people died.
Oh,
I'm alive. No fun to live with, you know. It's hard. And remains hard.
Man. What was the number they gave you?
69066.
And
to give you an idea how many people died, I got there in the spring of 1944. We were liberated on April 29, 1945. Then the highest number was 169,000. You can imagine how many people died in the camp.